Daf Yomi, Tractate Avodah Zarah, page 68a. Starting at the bottom of 67b with the words Rabbi Shimon my taima. Rabbi Shimon my taima, Ditanya lo tzarich l'kol level leger asher b'sharecha kol haroyo leger k'ruyo gnevelo. The Gemara asks, and what is the reasoning of Rabbi Shimon? It is, as it is taught in a Braita from the verse, you shall not eat any unslaughtered animal carcass. You may give it to the resident alien, like Ger, who is within your gates. He may eat it. Deuteronomy 14:21. It is derived that with regard to animal carcasses, anything that is fit for a Ger Toshav to consume is called an unslaughtered carcass and is forbidden. Now we turn to the top of 68a with the words She'ein ruya lager, eno kruya nevela, and any carcass that is unfit even for a ger toshav to consume. For example, one that turned rancid and is unfit for consumption is not called an unslaughtered carcass with regard to its prohibition. Rabbi Meir, hahu limud isrucha. Meikara, Rabbi Shimon Sirucha, Meikara lo tzricha miuta, af habial mahu. And what can Rabbi Meir respond to this? He could say that verse is written to exclude meat that was rancid at the outset, meaning that it was not fit for consumption even before the animal's death due to a defect in the animal. By contrast, a carcass that was fit for consumption when the animal died and was consequently rendered forbidden, remains forbidden even when it becomes rancid. And Rabbi Shimon could counter that meat was rancid at the outset does not need specific exclusion by the verse, as it is considered as mere dust and does not fall into the category of an unslaughtered animal carcass. Amar Ula machloikes shish bi'achnu le'mesoy pegam aval pegam nikara de'vechalota. Ula says this dispute between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon is with regard to a forbidden food that enhanced the flavor of a dish when it first fell into it and subsequently detracted from its flavor. In this case, Rabbi Meir deems a dish forbidden since the forbidden food enhances flavor at the outset. But in the case of forbidden food that detracted from the flavor of the dish at the outset, everyone agrees that it is permitted. Esvei Rabbi Chaga Le'ula Yain shenavel techadashim v'choy mit shenavel techagrisin aso v'Rabbi Shimon matir v'Rav Begam Mikar Hu Pligi. Rav Chaga raised an objection to the opinion of Ula from a Braita, forbidden wine that fell into lentils, or forbidden vinegar that fell into split beans, renders the food forbidden, and Rabbi Shimon deems them permitted. But here, it is a case where the forbidden food detracted from the flavor of the dish at the outset, and the Tanaim disagree. Amahula chaga lo mida yada ma'ika rabana. Tiofte komotiv hacha b'ma'eskinan kikon shenavel ter grisin soninin v'hirticham na'aseh kemi she'ish bi'ach ulbesof pegam asor. Ula said Chaga does not know what the sages said, yet he raises an objection. Here we are dealing with a case where the vinegar fell into the cold split beans and one subsequently heated them, in which case it becomes a forbidden food that enhanced the flavor of the mixture and subsequently detracted from it, as vinegar enhances the flavor of cold split beans, and it is consequently forbidden, according to Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yochanan Amar b'pogem mikar machloikes. And Rabbi Yochanan says the dispute between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon is with regard to a case where the forbidden food detracts from the flavor of the permitted food from the outset. A dilemma was raised before the sages. Does Rabbi Yochanan mean that the dispute is with regard to a case where the forbidden food detracts from its flavor from the outset, but if it enhanced it first and subsequently detracted from it, everyone agrees that it is forbidden? Or perhaps he means that the dispute is both in this case and in that case. The Gemara comments, the dilemma shall stand unresolved. Amar Rav Amram, Efshar ita lehad Yochanan v'lotanya la b'matnitin. Rav Amram said, is it possible that there is substance to the statement of Rabbi Yochanan? Meaning that there is disagreement with regard to a case where the forbidden food detracts from the flavor of the permitted food from the outset, but it is not taught in the Mishnah. Nafak dak v'ashkach. Ditanya so. Shalchu nishno zachayisa v'yesh bo kedei lahachmitz v'achmitza. ואחר כך נפל שיעור של תרומה או שיעור של כלי הכרם ויש לו כדי להחמיץ, אסור. ורבי שמעון מתיר. Rabbi Amram went out, examined the Mishnah, and discovered that this dispute is taught in the Mishnah in Orla 2:8. In the case of non-sacred leaven that fell into the dough, and there is enough of it to cause the dough to become leaven. And the dough indeed became leaven, and subsequently leaven of truma, or leaven of forbidden diverse kinds planted in a vineyard, fell into this dough, and there is enough of it to cause the dough to become leaven. The dough is forbidden because the forbidden leaven is considered to have contributed to the process of leavening. The Rabbi Shimon deems the dough permitted because the additional leaven has a negative impact on the dough, which was already leavened. Rav Amram comments, but here is a case where the forbidden substance detracted from the flavor of the dough at the outset. And Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon disagree, as a Mishnah that is not attributed explicitly to a Tana represents the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Amar Rabbi Zarah, Shani Isa, Rabbi Zarah said dough is different, because even if the additional leaven is detrimental to its flavor, in any event the dough is enhanced, since it is suitable for leavening several other batches of dough with it. The more is leavened, the more it is enhanced in terms of this purpose. Tashmas, shel truma, של חולין שנפלו לתוך העיסה, וזה כדי להחמיץ וזה כדי להחמיץ וחימצו, אסור. רבי שמעון מתיר, נפל של תרומה, תחילה, דברי הכל אסור. נפל של חולין ואחר כך נפל של תרומה, או של כלי הכרם אסור, ורבי שמעון מתיר. The Gemara suggests another source for the statement of Rabbi Yochanan, come and hear that which is taught in the Braita. In the case of leaven of truma, non-sacred leaven that fell into the dough, if this one was sufficient to cause the dough to become leaven, and that one was sufficient to cause the dough to become leaven, and they both cause the dough to become leaven, it is forbidden. Rabbi Shimon deems it permitted. If the leaven of truma fell in first, everyone agrees that it is forbidden. And if the non-sacred leaven fell in first, the subsequent leaven of truma or of different kinds that were planted in the vineyard fell in, this is also forbidden, but Rabbi Shimon deems it permitted. The Gemara comments, but here it is a case where the forbidden substance detracted from the flavor of the dough from the outset, and they disagree. And if you would say here too, and now turning to the next daf, I'll read the last line here. The last line took a break, so the last line of 68a is the Gemara comments, but here it is a case where the forbidden substance detracted from the flavor of the dough from the outset, and they disagree. And if you would say here too, now 68b on the top, Rabbi Zarah, this can be explained in accordance with the explanation of Rabbi Zarah. Toshima misefa hayayin shenafel letoch hadashim vechometz shenafel letoch risin asur Rabbi Shimon matir. This can be explained in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Zarah, that dough is different because it is enhanced. In any event, common here refutation of that explanation from the latter clause of the same Braita. Forbidden wine that fell into lentils, or forbidden vinegar that fell into split beans, renders the food forbidden. And Rabbi Shimon deems them permitted, and here also. It is the case where the forbidden substance detracted from the flavor of the dough from the outset, and they disagree. And if you would say here too, it can be explained, as Ul responded to Rabbi Chaga, that the Braita is referring to a case when the vinegar enhanced the flavor of the split beans and subsequently detracted from it. For example, where it spilled into cold split beans and then they were heated. This cannot be said as do they actually disagree in a case where the forbidden substance enhanced the flavor of the permitted food and subsequently detracted from it? But isn't it taught in the first clause of the Braita that if the leaven of Truma fell in first, before the non-sacred leaven, everyone agrees that it renders the dough forbidden as it enhanced the flavor of the dough at the outset, even though the flavor was subsequently detracted from by the non-sacred leaven. Rather, must one not conclude from it that the dispute is with regard to a case where the forbidden substance detracted from the flavor of the food from the outset? The Gemara affirms to conclude from this that this is so. Gemara asks, with regard to those three clauses that the Braita teaches concerning different cases, why do I need all three of them? Granted, the last clause concerning the wine spilled into the lentils teaches us that the dispute is with regard to a case where the forbidden substance detracts from the flavor of the food from the outset. The middle clause, with regard to the case where the leaven of Truma fell in first, also teaches in Avodah, which is that in the case of a forbidden substance that enhanced the flavor of the food and subsequently detracted from it, everyone agrees that the mixture is forbidden. Ela reish amali hashtam uma sifa delo kam mishaver klal asri rabanan reish de kam mishaver baye. But why do I need the first clause concerning the case of non-sacred leaven and leaven of Truma falling into the dough together? It could have been inferred from the other two clauses that the dough is forbidden in the following manner. Now, that in the case of the last clause, where the forbidden substance does not enhance the permitted food at all, the rabbis deem it forbidden. Is it necessary to say that it is forbidden in the first clause, where the forbidden substance enhances the food's flavor at first before detracting from it? Reish Rabbi Shimon Yitzri V'hacha Kamri לרבנן רבי שמעון איסה זו ראויה להחמיץ בשתי שויס מגורם לה שתחמיץ בשעה אחת איסור. Rabbi said the first clause is necessary to teach that Rabbi Shimon deems it permitted, and this is what the rabbi said to Rabbi Shimon. This dough is fit to become leaven in 2 hours. If the permitted leaven had fallen into it alone, what caused it to become leaven in 1 hour? The forbidden leaven. Therefore, the dough is forbidden. Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Shimon could respond that when the 2 types of leaven enhanced the flavor of the dough, they both enhanced it. Not only the forbidden leaven, when they subsequently detracted from it, they both detracted from it, therefore it is permitted. The Gemara asks, even according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, let the permitted leaven and the forbidden leaven combine together and render the dough forbidden, since Rabbi Shimon concedes that if the permitted food was initially enhanced by the forbidden substance, it is forbidden. Rabbi Shimon The Gemara responds, Rabbi Shimon conforms to his standard line of reasoning, as he says, that even a forbidden substance and another forbidden substance do not combine to render a mixture forbidden. Accordingly, a forbidden substance and a permitted substance certainly do not. Okay. The Gemara comments, this is, as we learned in the Mishnah, Me'ilah 18a. If orla and diverse kinds planted in a vineyard fell into a permitted substance, and neither one is sufficient in its own quantity to render the mixture forbidden, they combine to render it forbidden if together they are of a sufficient quantity. Rabbi Shimon says they do not combine, and each forbidden substance is treated individually. Here too, since when the forbidden leaven enhanced the dough, it was not sufficient to enhance it by itself, the permitted leaven does not combine with it to render the dough forbidden. Okay. The Gemara recounts an incident involving a certain mouse that fell into a barrel of beer. Rav deemed that barrel of beer forbidden. The sages said before Rav Sheshet, shall we say that Rav maintains that even in a case where the forbidden substance imparts flavor to the detriment of the mixture is forbidden? Presumably the mouse imparted flavor to the detriment of the beer. Amar lehu Rav Sheshet, v'alma savarav, noten tam l'rav muto, v'hacha chilushu, deha mimas ma'is, uvdili anashimene, v'afilu hachi asre rachmana, Rav Sheshet said to them, Rav generally maintains that in a case where the forbidden substance imparts flavor to the detriment of the mixture, it is permitted. But here, in the case of the mouse, it is a novelty that the Torah prohibits the flavor from a mouse at all, as it is repulsive and people distance themselves from consuming it, and even so the merciful one prohibits it. Therefore, although it imparts flavor to the detriment of the mixture, it is still forbidden. The sages said to Rav Sheshet, if that is so, that the halacha with regard to a mouse is considered a novelty, and is therefore understood to be more stringent than the norm, then a dead mouse should impart ritual impurity, whether it is moist or dried out. Why did we learn in the Mishnah, Nida 54b, that carcasses of creeping animals impart impurity when they are moist, but do not impart impurity when they are dried out? Rav Sheshet responded, and according to your reasoning, in which you compare the halachot of ritual impurity to forbidden foods, then with regard to soiman, which is also repulsive, it should impart impurity whether moist or dried out. Why did we learn in the Mishnah, Nida 54b, that soiman imparts impurity when it is moist, but it does not impart impurity when it is dried out? Elamai, islach lemema, shichvat zera, אמר רחמנא בראויה להזריע, הכנמי במותם, אמר רחמנא כאין מותם. Rather, what have you to say? With regard to the ritual impurity of Solomon, the Merciful One states the flow of seed, Leviticus 15:16, meaning that the reference to Solomon that is fit to fertilize. Here too, with regard to the ritual impurity of a mouse, the verse states, when they have died, Leviticus 11:32. The Merciful One states that the carcasses of creeping animals impart impurity only when they are similar to their state at time of their death, meaning when they are still moist. Therefore, there is no contradiction to the claim that the prohibition against eating a mouse is a novelty and consequently applies even when it detracted from the flavor of the food into which it fell. Maskif larav shimi min ardor umi ma'is v'halo al shulchan shel melachim. Amar Rav Shimi min ardor lo kashya ha b'didavra ha b'dimata. Rav Shimi of Narda objects to the assumption that a mouse is repulsive, and is it repulsive? But isn't it served at the table of kings and considered a delicacy? Rav Shimi of Narda says in clarification, this is not difficult. This statement that a mouse is served as a delicacy is stated with regard to a field mouse, and that statement that is repulsive is stated with regard to a city mouse. Amar Rabba hilchasa notin tam lugamuto ve'achbara b'shicha lo yedana mai tam rav im mishum degosava notin tam lugamuso v'let hilchatam kibate im mishum degosava notin tam lugamuta ve'achbara b'shicha ashboche mashbach. Rava said the halacha is that if the forbidden substance imparts flavor to the detriment of the mixture, it is permitted, but with regard to a mouse that fell into a barrel of beer, I do not know what the reason was that Rav deemed it forbidden. I do not know whether it was because he maintains that if the forbidden substance imparts flavor to the detriment of the mixture, it is forbidden, and if so, the halacha is not in accordance with his opinion, or whether it was because, although he maintains that if the forbidden substance imparts flavor to the detriment of the mixture, it is permitted, a mouse that falls into beer enhances its flavor. A dilemma was raised before the sages.